A small coastal town that seems calm but beneath the surface hides dark secrets that are about to be revealed. Marco Souza, a devoted husband, suddenly notices a strange distance growing between him and his wife Carolina. However, what he discovers next will shock the entire town. It isn't merely a love affair. Unsuspecting residents find themselves entangled in a terrible tragedy. A video played on a giant screen during a religious service unleashes the wrath of a betrayed husband, but this is just the beginning of a cruel and bloody chain of events. Marco Souza was born and raised in a regular working-class family in the suburbs of Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. He was a simple, kind man who always worked hard to earn a living and support his family with a calm temperament. Marco didn't ask for much for himself. He only wished for a simple, peaceful life, like everyone else. His youth passed without any major events, holding a stable job at a construction supply store and living quietly in the small town. At the age of 30, following his family's advice, he agreed to an arranged marriage with Carolina Costa, a young woman from a neighboring family. Carolina, born into a wealthy family in central Rio de Janeiro, grew up as an only child, surrounded by a loving family. She was always protected and enjoyed a comfortable life. Carolina, with her beautiful and elegant appearance, attracted the attention of those around her, but deep inside, she always felt lonely and emotionally neglected since childhood. Carolina was taught to be a traditional woman, taking on the roles of wife and mother. So, when she reached the appropriate age, her family arranged her marriage to Marco, a simple but stable man, hoping marriage would provide Carolina with security and a peaceful life. In early 2018, Marco Souza and Carolina Costa officially married in a small traditional ceremony in the coastal town of Rio de Janeiro. The wedding went smoothly, filled with family and traditional customs, just as both families had hoped. To everyone around them, their marriage seemed the perfect blend of stability and tradition. Marco and Carolina's married life was full of joy and stability for the first year after their wedding. They shared sweet moments and built a home full of hope for a lasting future. However, after a year of living together, everything began to change. Marco became increasingly immersed in his work, often busy and spending less time with his family. Carolina, yearning for attention and affection, started to feel lonely and lost in her own marriage. The small distances between them grew wider, creating a coldness in their relationship. Carolina, an emotional woman, began to feel empty as Marco's gestures of kindness and care became rare luxuries in their marriage. She didn't know who to share her sadness with, and the church, which she had attended since childhood, became her spiritual refuge. During that time, Carolina began attending church more frequently, not only on Sundays, but also on weekday evenings. Each time she went, she sat quietly in the last pew, praying in hopes of finding peace for her troubled soul. The flickering candles in the church only made her feel lonelier, but there she felt free from judgment, surrounded by a sacred space. Father Ricardo, a 40-year-old man with a calm demeanor and a deep understanding of human psychology, quickly noticed the hidden sadness in Carolina's eyes. He realized she was visiting the church more often, not like the other believers. Every time Carolina sat after praying, she remained silent, not speaking to anyone, simply observing the church in the dim light. Ricardo, with his priestly duties, gently approached Carolina. At first, he only asked about her family life and offered her guidance on how to restore her relationship through faith. However, gradually, Ricardo's interest became more personal than pastoral, and their conversations grew longer and more intimate. Over time, feeling lost, Carolina began to rely on Ricardo's words and presence to fill the void Marco had left. She felt heard and understood, something she no longer experienced with her husband. From these seemingly innocent conversations, a dangerous relationship began to develop between Carolina and Father Ricardo, one she never anticipated would change her life forever. According to Carolina's later confession to Marco, the first time she betrayed him was in Father Ricardo's small room behind St. Peter's Church. It was an autumn afternoon in 2019 when Carolina arrived at the church, exhausted and frustrated by her cold marriage. After the service, Father Ricardo invited her to his room for a conversation in the name of comfort and spiritual communion. In that room, in a quiet and private space amidst soothing words and delicate care, the boundaries between priest and believer became blurred. Carolina, in a moment of overwhelming loneliness and weakness, lost control, and their relationship crossed into forbidden territory. That room, meant to be a place of prayer and peace-seeking, became the stage for the first betrayal. And from then on, everything in their lives changed forever. After that initial betrayal and the meeting in Father Ricardo's room, Carolina felt an awakening within her. It wasn't only a feeling of guilt, but also a sense of being alive again, as if she had found a lost part of herself. Ricardo, with his composed and dignified presence, possessed a mysterious charm that Carolina found irresistible. During their moments together, she realized Ricardo was not only spiritually strong, but also filled with a passion she had never felt with Marco. From that first encounter, their relationship didn't stop. Carolina felt the thrill of secrecy and constantly sought ways to be close to Ricardo. They began meeting more frequently, not just during evening prayers or after church services, but boldly, even in Carolina's own home. Each time Marco left for work in the afternoon, Carolina invited Ricardo over. When he arrived, they seized every minute they had together. The house of Marco and Carolina, once a peaceful refuge for the couple, became a place of sinful secrets. Their encounters took place in Carolina's bedroom, sometimes on the living room sofa, with the door closed to hide any evidence. The walls of the house became silent witnesses to their illicit adventures. Carolina seemed unable to stop. Each time she was with Ricardo, she was filled with excitement and tension. She knew what she was doing was wrong, but the pull toward Ricardo was too strong to resist. The thrill of their encounters made them lose control more often, and Carolina frequently watched the clock anxiously, fearing Marco might return at any moment. But that feeling of danger only heightened her excitement. Gradually, their meetings became an indispensable part of Carolina's life. She no longer cared how she had ended up in that situation. She was lost in a passion she had never experienced before. Her relationship with Ricardo deepened, and Carolina knew there was no turning back from the path she had chosen. By July 2019, Marco noticed a clear change in Carolina. She grew increasingly distant, often leaving the house under the pretext of church activities for prayer and charity. Carolina's late nights or sudden afternoon departures began to make Marco anxious. Her vague responses about her time at church and her altered demeanor only heightened Marco's suspicions. She stopped spending time with him, and when he asked about her absences, Carolina replied curtly or used religious excuses to avoid him. Marco, a devoted husband who had always trusted his wife, began to sense something was wrong. Father Ricardo, the priest his family had always respected, began appearing more frequently in Carolina's stories, deepening his concern. The actions of Carolina and the puzzle pieces gradually convinced Marco that she was hiding a far greater secret. In August 2019, tormented by suspicions of his wife's infidelity, Marco decided to take matters into his own hands. While he was away on a business trip, he secretly installed cameras throughout the house to monitor every move in his absence. Days later, when he reviewed the footage, Marco couldn't believe his eyes. He was stunned to see an explicit recording of Carolina and Father Ricardo naked on the living room sofa. The betrayal took place in the very home he considered his safest haven. Rage consumed Marco as he witnessed his wife and the man he once trusted engaging in an illicit affair. The feelings of betrayal and humiliation overwhelmed him, but instead of confronting them immediately, Marco plotted revenge in an unexpected way. He planned a public reckoning to expose the truth, all while hiding his intentions from Carolina. The thought of her betrayal tormented him daily, driving him to meticulously plan how to reclaim his shattered pride. On September 15, 2019, Marco was ready for the moment that would change his life and the lives of everyone around him. The Sunday Mass at the church was as crowded as ever, with hundreds of worshippers listening intently to Father Ricardo's sermon. No one expected that a great scandal was brewing within that solemn and sacred setting. After many sleepless nights of careful planning, Marco had rigged the church's projection system, preparing to reveal the shocking truth about Carolina and Father Ricardo's illicit relationship. As Ricardo's sermon reached its peak, Marco seized the moment with a single click. The large screen behind the pulpit lit up, drawing everyone's attention. At first, the ambiguous and explicit images confused the congregation, but in a moment, screams and murmurs erupted as they recognized the two figures in the video, Carolina and Father Ricardo, naked in an intimate position on Marco's living room sofa. The entire church fell into a chilling silence. No one could believe their eyes. The worshippers were so stunned they could only stand frozen, some covering their mouths, others closing their eyes or turning away in disgust and shock. Whispers and cries filled the church like a storm, shattering the sacred peace of the ceremony. Carolina, seated among the congregation, felt her face burn and her body collapse. She kept her head down, not daring to look up, suffocating in the humiliation that made it hard to breathe.